The Yakuza are declining. Fast. For the 19th year in a row, Japan's centuries-old organized crime groups had to witness a sharp decline in terms of membership numbers, dropping from an estimated 26,000 members in 2023 to 24,000 members in 2024. The only upward trend that the Yakuza get to experience these days is their ever-increasing age, because much like the general population of Japan itself, the Yakuza are getting older and older, with little to no young blood ready to succeed them. It's hard not to view the Yakuza as somewhat of a dying breed, a collection of old men who desperately cling to dated traditions, antiquated hierarchical structures, and past glories, while their influence and financial prowess slowly evaporate before their own eyes. I mean, these guys resort to stealing Pokemon cards now, for God's sake. But of course, criminality, being one of humanity's oldest professions, always finds a way. It never truly goes away. It adapts, and recently, there has been an increasing amount of reports of such an adaptation taking place in Japan's criminal underworld. One that does not take place among the ranks of the Yakuza. Younger, more tech-savvy, more elusive, and in some areas already more successful than their fast-aging, Pokemon card-stealing Yakuza counterparts, so-called Tokuryū gangs have been making headlines in the international media while also grabbing the attention of both the Japanese police and general public. So what exactly are these Tokuryū gangs? How do they operate? What kind of crimes do they commit? What makes them different from the Yakuza? And what does their future hold? Might they, as an increasing amount of media outlets are reporting, have the potential to someday replace the fast-declining Yakuza? Or is all of this perhaps blown a bit out of proportion? Well, coincidentally, this video seeks to answer all of these and many more questions. But before we do that, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new here and don't want to miss out on any future Japanese crime or history content, and check out my Patreon if you're interested in supporting me even further. But now that we got the shameless self-promotion out of the way, let's get this thing started. This is a closer look at the Tokuryū. Location: Nasu, Tochigi Prefecture, around 150 kilometers northeast of Tokyo. On the morning of April 16, 2024, a local resident makes a shocking discovery near a river. Two burned corpses, later identified as Takarajima Ryutaro and Sachiko, a married couple, 55 and 56 years old respectively, and owners of several popular restaurants located in Tokyo's Ueno district. As of the making of this video, this case is actually still developing, but here's what we know so far. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police has so far arrested and investigated a total of 6 suspects believed to be involved in a gruesome murder of the Takarajimas, including Wakayama Kirato, Kangwangi, Hirayama Ryoken, Maeda Ryo, Sasaki Hikaru, and Sekine Seiha, the mastermind behind this whole murder case. The murder itself took place in Tokyo's Shinagawa ward on the night of April 15th. At 9:30 p.m., 25-year-old construction worker Hirayama Ryoken met with 2 other men, Wakayama Kirato and Kangwangi, and lent them his car. The two left in the borrowed car at 11:30 p.m. and around midnight came into contact with their victims, the Takarajimas, strangling and subsequently killing the couple inside the garage of an unoccupied house, believed to be owned by real estate company executive Maeda Ryo. The bodies were then transported to Nasu by Kang and Wakayama, where they were then disposed of by Sasaki Hikaru near a riverbed. The bodies of the Nakarajimas were discovered the following morning by a passerby, their bodies completely burned, their limbs bound together, and plastic bags placed over their heads. The murder of Takarajima Ryutaro and Sachiko naturally evokes several emotions: disgust, sadness, but it also makes one wonder. Why would a Japanese couple in their mid-50s with a thriving restaurant business in Tokyo become the victim of such a gruesome crime? The answer lies with the aforementioned mastermind of the murder, Sekine Seiha, who was also the husband of the murdered couple's daughter and a manager at the company that ran the Takarajima family business. And apparently, it was a dispute over how the business should be run that prompted the 32-year-old to plot the murder of Ryutaro and Sachiko. But how do the other 5 suspects fit into this whole picture? Well, that is where things get interesting, because for the most part, the men involved in this brutal killing had absolutely no relation to neither the victims nor to each other. In fact, they knew so little about their literal partners in crime, they didn't even know their names. What we are looking at here is a prime example of what the Japanese like to refer to as a yami baito, a shady part-time job that targets troubled, young people who for a multitude of different reasons are ready to accept work that is simple, profitable, but above all, illegal. 20-year-old Wakayama Kirato, one of the two young men who strangled the Takarajimas, perfectly fits this description. Just a few years ago, this guy was actually a very promising child actor who landed roles in shows like Kamen Rider, as well as the 2014 live-action remake of Studio Ghibli's Kiki's Delivery Service. But for the past couple of years, Wakayama seems to have been in deep financial trouble. How bad his situation really was is unknown, but apparently it was bad enough for him to accept Sekine's offer of murdering innocent people, in exchange for, according to Wakayama's own testimony, 1 million yen. Or around 6,000 US dollars. The Takarajima murders are unfortunately not an isolated case, including the way that the whole thing was set up in the first place. Because shady part-time jobs like this are the bread and butter of a new criminal threat currently sweeping across Japan. The Tokuryū. The term Tokuryū is formed by two kanji letters. Toku meaning anonymous or hidden, and ryu meaning flow or fluid. This term was coined fairly recently by the Japanese police, who noticed a growing number of criminal organizations that share a distinct modus operandi. Well-structured, yet amateurish, often directed by an unseen mastermind dictating the crime. In a way, what the Japanese police started referring to as Tokuryū is nothing more than an evolution of the hangure, or half-grey groups, which came up at around the same time that the Yakuza first started their steady decline in the 2000s. The hangure, while holding on to regular day jobs while taking part in illicit activities, navigate the space between being a regular citizen and being a criminal. A grey area, if you will, hence the name hangure, or half-grey. Those recruited by the Tokuryū are no different. They are best described as quasi-criminals, regular citizens who might never have had any actual contact with the criminal underworld before, but for some reason see themselves left with no choice but to partake in yami baito, or shady part-time jobs, in order to make some quick cash. What seems to set the Tokuryū organizations apart from their quote-unquote spiritual predecessors, though, is the way that they utilize modern technology to their advantage. Because their main base of recruitment and operations can be found not on the streets, but on the internet. The World Wide Web is where the masterminds behind all different kinds of yami baito communicate with and organize new recruits for jobs ranging from online and phone scams to drug trafficking or even murder. The tasks required to carry out a job are usually split between multiple different recruits who in most cases have no personal connection to each other, do not know each other's names, and are expected to split up after a job is done. They are seen as nothing more than disposable tools by the mastermind, who can either be a group or, as we've seen with the case of Sekine Seiha and the Takarajimas, an individual. Recruits are first lured in through advertisements on popular social networking sites, think Facebook or Instagram, that only offer a vague description of what kind of work the job actually entails. Once the mastermind has made contact with a potential recruit, the conversation is then taken to encrypted messaging apps like Telegram or Signal. But in some cases, burner phones may also be used for an increased level of secrecy. This is also when a recruit's personal information is collected by the mastermind, used to intimidate and blackmail the recruit, should they change their mind about the whole thing or try to talk to the police. According to the police, Tokuryū masterminds also resort to threatening violence against the recruit's family members should they attempt to withdraw from the job. A 20-year-old girl arrested in connection to a Tokuryū-related crime told the police, quote, "I realized it was a scam, but I had already given the crime group my photo ID and a video of my parents' home, so I felt I had no choice but commit the crime." The name and identity of the mastermind, on the other hand, pretty much always remains a complete mystery to the recruit. What makes Tokuryū groups both unique and attractive to potential recruits is their organizational structure. Or rather, the lack thereof. The structure of a traditional organized crime group like the Yakuza, at least in most cases, is shaped like a pyramid, with a clearly defined leader at the top of the organization and his subordinates below him. Simply becoming a member of a Yakuza gang requires one to not only obey the leader, but also to dedicate one's entire life to the gang, swearing complete loyalty and obedience. Quitting becomes near impossible, and those who are passionate enough to actually try and rise up the ranks of a Yakuza organization will be greeted by a long, rocky road towards their goal, filled with menial labor and little to no respect shown by one's elders. Not to mention that the Japanese government is making life itself harder and harder for the Yakuza. As part of an increasing number of anti-organized crime measures that started all the way back in the early 90s, Yakuza members are now barred from opening bank accounts, or even buying cell phones or insurance. Being a Yakuza member is anything but enjoyable or glamorous these days. And that is exactly where the Tokuryū are able to swoop in and offer an attractive alternative, doing exactly what the Yakuza did in their heyday, but are now more or less completely unable to do. Prey on desperate and impressionable young people looking to dip their toes into crime, but in this case with little to no effort required to actually do so. The Tokuryū offer regular citizens the chance to participate in work that is high risk, but also high reward. All without having to cut scallions for some old dude for 10 years first, like a low-ranking Yakuza member. And in some cases, shady part-time jobs promoted online by the Tokuryū have the potential to make the participants an insane amount of money. Because not everyone is stupid enough to actually kill innocent people for 6,000 bucks, like a certain Wakayama Kirato. In May of 2023, Tokyo's glamorous Ginza shopping district was stunned by a heist that could very well be a side mission in a GTA game. At roughly 6:15 PM, 3 young men entered the Quark Ginza 888 store, threatened staff with a knife, and proceeded to smash the store's showcase cabinets, stealing around 100 luxury watches worth more than a combined $700,000 US, before taking off in a rental getaway car waiting outside. It didn't even take half an hour for the police to catch the 3 robbers plus the getaway driver, while a 5th suspect was seemingly able to escape. This whole heist, while close to being a success, was done in a suspiciously amateur manner. Probably because the perpetrators were all teenagers, between 16 and 19 years old. This was of course another Tokuryū-style yamibaito. And as usual, the robbers had no personal connection to each other and met for the first time when the actual job took place. The Ginza watch store heist certainly made the most headlines, but it was far from the only Tokuryū-style robbery taking place at the time. Because between March and May of 2023, 5 similar robberies occurred in Tokyo alone. And since 2021, more than 50 Tokuryū-related robberies across 14 different prefectures have been reported. Due to their incredibly secretive nature, calculating exact numbers and statistics regarding the Tokuryū is a bit difficult. But according to the National Police Agency of Japan, around 10,000 criminals classified as Tokuryū were arrested between September of 2021 and February of 2023. And the police are taking this whole issue very seriously. An investigation unit focused on social media and phone scams was established in April of 2024, while National Police Chief Tsuyuki Yasuhiro called for changes regarding Japan's anti-organized crime measures. He also urged the police towards an organizational restructuring, as well as increased cooperation between different departments, namely those responsible for cybercrime, robbery, and fraud. In light of the Tokuryū problem, the Japanese police are now also expected to cooperate more with authorities abroad, because the activities of Japan's new cyber criminals are not limited to the borders of their own country. Over a span of 3 years, phone scams are said to have taken around 6 billion yen, or around $36 million US, out of the pockets of unsuspecting Japanese citizens. The crazy part? Most of these scams, as well as a large number of the aforementioned 50 Tokuryū-related robberies that took place across Japan, are suspected to have been directed by one Tokuryū-style syndicate, operating from the Philippines. 38-year-old Watanabe Yuki, who adopted the online moniker Luffy, was the mastermind behind multiple years of fraud, robbery, and even murder. Born in Hokkaido, Watanabe aka Luffy set up his first overseas crime base in Thailand, but eventually moved to the Philippines in 2017 to continue running his shady business. From here, he and a few trusted associates, aided by underlings located in Japan and hired over the internet, started robbing elderly Japanese people of their ATM cards by impersonating employees of the financial services agency. The victim's account would then be drained, generating a massive profit for everyone involved. Rinse and repeat. This worked well for quite a while, but when more and more phone scammers started facing lengthy jail sentences in Japan, Luffy and his crew decided to change things up a bit. But this time, things got a lot more violent than just stealing ATM cards. The Luffy crew now pretended to be a telemarketing company, calling random people and conducting a survey on their lifestyle and assets. This represented the first step of an elaborate scheme. The survey was basically a way of identifying potential, wealthy targets, which were then straight up robbed, again by underlings hired online using traditional Tokuryū methods. Unfortunately, things got very violent very quickly on multiple occasions. In December of 2022, for example, a resident of Tokyo's Nakano ward was beaten and severely injured by a group of thieves which robbed him of around 30 million yen in cash kept inside his house. Then, only a month later, robbers entered a home in Tokyo's Komae suburb, not only stealing around 600,000 yen in cash and jewelry, but also killing the homeowner, 90-year-old Oshio Kinuyo. In total, at least 70 people involved in violent robberies across Japan and believed to be connected with the Luffy Syndicate have been arrested since late 2022. At that time, the Japanese authorities were not only aware of a supposed Tokuryū syndicate operating from the Philippine capital of Manila, they knew Luffy's identity and actively sought the extradition of both him and his associates. But Watanabe and the rest of his syndicate were not only able to keep dodging extradition to Japan, they were also able to keep operating for a little while longer from Manila. From a jail in Manila, to be precise. As soon as Luffy caught wind of his imminent deportation, he devised a plan to exploit a loophole in the Philippine legal system, telling his wife to file a complaint accusing him of domestic violence. In the Philippines, people with pending domestic charges are not allowed to be extradited until their case is settled. And so, Luffy was arrested and sent to jail in Manila, unable to be brought back to Japan by the authorities. His partners in crime exploited similar loopholes, and together, they continued running their business from jail with the help of smartphones, prepaid SIM cards, and Wi-Fi access, all attained by bribing jail staff. It wasn't until February of 2023 that Luffy and his buddies' cases, deemed to be fabricated, were finally dismissed, leading to their release from jail and subsequent deportation to Japan that same month. With that, Watanabe Yuki, the biggest Tokuryū mastermind, at least that we know of, was finally caught and put behind bars in Japan after years of scamming and robbing the Japanese. But while Watanabe has now disappeared from the scene, the character of Luffy lives on. And no, I am not talking about the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates here. In November of 2022, a man arrested for robbery claimed to have met Luffy, the Tokuryū mastermind, in person. But that was impossible because Watanabe was sitting in his cozy Manila jail cell at that time. So, it seems that either A, Luffy has inspired multiple copycat criminals both pretending to be him and copying his methods, or B, Luffy wasn't actually the leader of the whole syndicate, but rather a leader. Meaning that, even with Watanabe Yuki out of the picture, similar crimes in his style may be able to continue seamlessly in the future. So, all in all, I think it's safe to say that the whole Tokuryū problem is definitely not blown out of proportion by neither the Japanese police nor the media. This could certainly be the dawn of a new chapter in Japanese crime, one that breaks from the Yakuza's centuries-long grip on the underworld dating back to the days of the Tokugawa shogunate. Not only that, but in many ways, Tokuryū groups have the potential to be even more dangerous than the Japanese gangsters of old. Instead of counting on a fixed number of known active members, Tokuryū-style criminals, by advertising their profitable crimes online, make sure that every Japanese citizen becomes at least a potential criminal. Obviously, the percentage of people who will actually go through with committing a crime is comparably small. But at the same time, there will always be someone financially desperate enough to do whatever it takes to make some quick cash. A problem that might only be amplified by Japan's current economic climate and the country's subsequent rise in poverty. The most obvious danger posed by the Tokuryū groups, however, is just how secretive and at times invisible they are. With no fixed organizational structure to speak of, no permanent members who actually leave the house to commit a crime, and recruits both unaware of their employer's identity and worried about their own safety and that of their family, putting the masterminds responsible for this ever-increasing amount of Tokuryū-style crimes behind bars becomes a daunting, frustrating task for the authorities. It's a far cry from when Yakuza syndicates operated in plain sight like regular businesses, often even with their name and logo proudly presented outside their offices, telling the police exactly where to go if there was a problem. While I am of the opinion that the Yakuza shouldn't be glorified as the chivalrous Robin Hood characters that they often like to view themselves as, a valid argument can be made that if crime must exist in the future, and it inevitably will, having gangs around that are at least somewhat predictable and organized is probably the lesser evil. So the final question is, do the Tokuryū gangs actually have what it takes to completely replace the Yakuza in the future? Possibly, but at the same time, I can totally see the Yakuza instead utilizing the Tokuryū's methods and criminal network in their favor in order to reinvent themselves. This is a completely realistic scenario too, especially since the Tokuryū have reportedly collaborated with the Yakuza on certain jobs before, blurring the line between the two groups and making it even harder for the police to determine who is actually involved. Additionally, Tokuryū groups have reportedly started investing in various illegal businesses, clearly adopting strategies from the Yakuza's playbook. In short, I think that if the Tokuryū don't end up completely replacing the Yakuza as the dominant form of organized crime in Japan, the two might as well end up merging in a way, potentially creating an even bigger problem than the police, despite their best efforts, could realistically ever deal with. But this is where I would like to hear your opinion. Are the Tokuryū something to be worried about? How will they evolve in the future, and will they actually put an end to centuries of Yakuza dominance in Japan? Feel free to drop your answers and all other types of thoughts in the comments down below. Also, I want to give a big shout out to my loyal Patreon supporters listed here, including Busner, Bobby Wu, Mark Takagi, Javier Soravia, Capybara Chuck, Turam, Daniel Dees, RK0, White Gilden, Justin Down, Yoko the Space Whale, Steve Matsui, Cats and Soup, and Charred B-Man. And to everyone who took their time to finish this video, thank you so much for watching. Sayonara.